What, if anything, having done this in the past, surprised you the most, sort of in the experience of documenting all this?
I never, I had so little experience with the U.S. military. I don't even know if I had any expectations. So I wasn't that surprised. They never talked about the politics of the war, the sort of big picture. It didn't surprise me, but it surprises a lot of other people. How can you fight a war and not talk about the premise of the war? The police don't really talk about the social issues surrounding crime, the issues of social justice surrounding crime, surrounding police work. They just don't talk about it. They do their job, Fire department, they're not, it's like those people are doing very dangerous jobs. They really don't talk about the big issues. And soldiers are the same way.
Well, how much could you relate to, one of the soldiers at least talks about the idea of having nightmares after having come back, and just sort of after experiencing all that, it's sort of haunting them. I mean, did the fact that you were going in and out and doing those other things, did that sort of help you avoid that? Did you experience some of that yourself, or?
Yeah, anytime you do an assignment that's upsetting and scary, there's some psychological repercussions, like dreams and stuff. You're a little jumpy, a little short-tempered. I mean, Tim and I are older, and I think the older you get, the more you can kind of weather, the less trauma sort of affects you. A girl breaks up with you when you're 16, you're ready to hang yourself, At 36, you're like, okay, another one down, I'll be fine. That's just how life is. And similarly, these guys are 19 years old, 20 years old. And so, Tim and I didn't lose anyone we were really, really close to. We knew guys who got killed, but we hadn't spent a year, it was different. It wasn't a peer relationship. We never had to ask ourselves if their deaths were our fault. All the soldiers would think, oh shit, could I have saved Larry Rugel? Cortez, the guy who had the nightmares, do you know what his nightmares were? They were, every night he was back on that hillside trying to run up the hill, in his dreams, trying to run up the side of the hill fast enough to save Larry. And every time he did it, he would run and run and run in his dreams, and he still wasn't fast enough to save his friend. And when he got there, his friend was dead. And he was just reliving that moment and trying to make it turn out right every night. Tim and I didn't have to deal with that because it wasn't our responsibility. I had some issues, but they weren't quite as heavy as the soldiers were.
One of the things that I think is a really fascinating juxtaposition in the documentary is not just showing the camaraderie of these guys, but the sort of like surprising looseness that they have when they have downtime. I mean, these guys playing, like dance music and jumping around, or wrestling in a way that certainly is like sort of like a guys club, but there's also like a real earnest sort of like, oh, that was fun, and like, let's go on. Was it did it take any time for those guys to get comfortable enough around you to sort of, I don't know if that qualifies as opening up, but I mean, to do that, or was it something where they're so occupied with their responsibilities that it wasn't?
No. It definitely took them a while. They sort of like were guarded at first, a little less guarded, and then by the third trip, which is when that dance scene happened, by then they pretty much figured we were okay. There wasn't really much reason to hide anything. It took a little while. By the end, we were just part of it. I really felt we were part of it too. They just didn't even think of us as outsiders.
This, again, this is certainly a very visceral, and I believe I read an interview where you very specifically said you wanted this to be experiential, not political. Do you feel like you found that you were able to explore this in the way that you got as much material as you would have wanted to, that you were able to create a complete enough portrait of this experience as you would have liked, or you know, would 2 more trips have improved it, or you know, do you think?
You know, journalists always wish they had another 10 minutes to ask questions. They always wish they had another week in the country. You know, I would have loved to have spent more time out there. We spent a lot of time out there, but you know, it was hard not to think, wow, imagine the movie we could have made if we'd spent the entire year out there, or whatever. You know, 2 months at a time. You know, like. So yeah, of course I had those thoughts, but I think there's such a thing as having too much material too, you know. And at the end of the day, I think we were actually a good mix. I think we were there, I think, about as much as we could have been without crossing over into just drowning in the material, completely losing any sort of like objective sense of what the story is. Like, I think we were right at that sort of edge of that. So I think it was good. But definitely during that year, I was thinking, I wish I had more time. I didn't. I had things I had to do back home, but I just kept going back and forth. But I definitely had those thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you feel like you were able to, I guess, sort of satisfy your own curiosity, or sort of the idea of capturing this experience, or you know, given the fact that you've done, you know, sort of multiple pieces about battles and war, that's something that's going to be sort of continually fascinating you in terms of what your sort of future projects might be?
I feel like I satisfied my curiosity in that sense. I mean, I hope I make another movie. I doubt it'll be about combat, but I hope I make another movie. I really enjoyed it. Totally different way of thinking. It really expanded my mind in a lot of ways. Yeah, no, it was a tremendous experience.
Well, do you have anything lined up as like another thing that's been sort of that has piqued your interest that you are planning to do?
I don't have anything lined up yet. I mean, I've just been, you know, this was a 4-year project. I started in the spring of '07. Here we are, you know, almost the spring of '11. I've just been doing this. You know, it's probably the most. I think it's good between the book that I wrote and the movie. Probably the most sort of integrated, profound work project I'll ever do. You know, I think. So I'm not in a hurry to jump to the next thing. Like, I want to see this through. Incredibly thrilled about the Academy nomination, and you know, it feels like, you know, life starts after that. You know, I'm just going to sort of see what my next step is, but I'm not even thinking about it yet.
Well, obviously the nomination must be an affirmation of feeling like you accomplished what you set out to do. You know, how has sort of the experience of getting it out, people seeing it been? I mean, have you found that people are responding in the way that if you wanted them to respond a certain way, that they're responding that way?
Yeah, it's been incredible. It's been amazing. Like the military families, the wives, the girlfriends, the parents. We've just gotten so many emails, so many people coming up to us at screenings, thanking us for like allowing them to sort of look through the keyhole into this weird room called combat that they can't go in, but their sons, their husbands, their boyfriends have dwelled in that world for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and come back very, very changed. And it sort of has allowed them to understand that experience, because the guys can't talk about it very well, you know? That was amazing. One woman said to me after an event, she said, if I'd seen your movie, read your book before the divorce, she was married to a combat vet. If I'd seen your movie before the divorce, I'd read your book before the divorce, I don't think we would have gotten divorced. And then the other end of the spectrum, like the civilian population, I mean, I'm from Massachusetts, a very liberal state. I'm liberal. We played in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and guaranteed the audience was 90% anti-war. I mean, for sure. I mean, I know those people. That's where I'm from. And I was there with some soldiers who came up to help me with the Q&A. Some soldiers from the movie. And when they walked in, I introduced them to everyone in the theater. The entire theater stood up and applauded. 90% of those people think it's, a travesty that we're in Afghanistan. We really reached people. in a way that was not sort of handcuffed by politics. We just sort of reached them on a human level. That's what we wanted to do, and it was just incredibly gratifying to see it work.